Sequencing in Magic the Gathering, and Commander especially, is extremely important. You gotta know what cards to play and in what order you're supposed to play them in, as well as when to switch phases, when to go to combat, when to end your turn, when to react to things. Sequencing is hard. There is a ton of options that could potentially happen in a game of EDH. It's why we like the game, right? It's so replayable because no two games are the same. But if you're tired of taking things back, if you're tired of constantly messing up or flubbing or missing triggers or any of these things, sit back, relax, and let's talk about sequencing in Commander, the most underrated and under-talked about skill in Magic the Gathering. So when we talk about sequencing, let's define what we mean by that. Sequencing could simply be defined as the order in which you do things within Magic the Gathering. And in this video, we're going to be going over what to play and when to play it. So let's focus on that first thing, what to play. In order to know what to play, you have to know what your deck wants to do at any given point in time. So is your deck an aggro deck? Is it a mid-range deck? Is it a control deck? Is it a combo deck? What kind of deck are you running? Then what kind of turn clock are you on? Are you trying to turbo out a combo as early as turn 3 or 4? Or are you trying to grind out the game and play that combo on turn 8? Are you trying to aggro out the board and be able to swing lethal on somebody as early as turn 5? Or are you trying to accumulate a massive swarm of Eldrazi to annihilate the entire board in the late game? Any deck can do anything, but you need to know what that is. A lot of this problem solving is done outside of the game in the deck building process, but can then translate into the game, so let's talk about that now. It is turn 4 and you're playing a slow control deck that eventually wants to flood the board with some really big creatures to help you end the game. It's turn 4 and you've already played a ramp piece, so you're untapping with 5 lands. And in your hand, you have a board wipe, you have one of your late game threat creatures, you have another ramp piece, and you have some sort of stacks piece that's going to slow down the game, like an Authority of the Consuls. This is where sequencing is extremely important. So let's finally go over a process that you can follow to figure out what you need. So sequencing, in my opinion, can be broken down like this: gathering as much knowledge as possible, figuring out which cards complement your game plan and if it's the right time for them to complement that game plan, then analyzing the results of the cards you just played, and going back to the knowledge step. So let's break these 3 steps down. In the knowledge step, you want to be seeing as many cards as possible. This means inspecting the board state, inspecting your hand, inspecting every little detail that is known to you, and gathering as much knowledge of the board as possible. Then the next half of knowledge is seeing as many cards as possible. So yes, you just saw the board, but can you draw a card? If you're ever confused on what to do in terms of sequencing, seeing more cards, aka drawing or scrying or surveilling, is always going to be the #1 option you should choose. The more knowledge you have, the better equipped you'll be to make these decisions. So if we go back to the example of the cards we had in our hand previously, let's say we have a couple of lands in this hand as well. Growth Spiral is by far the best card that you could play here. Of course, it depends on the other board state, but what this deck wants to do is make it to the late game and play as many big creatures as possible. So playing that Growth Spiral is going to give us the most options available. It's going to still leave us with 4 mana, assuming we play a land from it. Then we'll have a board wipe available, or we can play Helga and Authority of the Consuls at the same time, getting ready to play our Hydra the next turn. Drawing, surveilling, or scrying, seeing more cards no matter what it is going to help you be as equipped as possible to make the best decision. You know what cards you have at your disposal, and you've seen as many cards as you possibly have been able to see. From there, the next most important step is understanding what your deck wants to do and at what time. This is the same thing we talked about in the beginning of the video. When you know where your deck is at in a particular game, in this case it's turn 4 with 5 mana available, you know that you're slowly getting to the point where you can actually start participating in the game. Some decks at this point might have already started to pop off, and you might have a Zergo across the table that's showing 20 plus damage on the next turn. In which case, if you're trying to get to the late game, maybe the board wipe is the most important card to play. Or let's say there's a Voltron deck that is absolutely huge and you know it's just going to get even bigger. Maybe at that point, your creature is the right play to make, so you can have a blocker. Or still, maybe the board wipe is the correct choice. This is where the knowledge portion is so important. And then analyzing what your deck wants to do. At the end of the day, when you look at this hand specifically, the Growth Spiral or the Wrath is going to be the best option for your deck at that particular time. Then the last step is to figure out the results of the cards that you just played. So we just gained a lot more knowledge because we chose to play our growth spiral. And with that growth spiral, we drew into a Teferi's protection. Now the sequencing gets even more confusing. Do you want to board wipe and potentially have this aggro deck get totally stomped out of the game and not be able to deal damage to some of your opponents? Or do you allow the aggro player to potentially make a choice to attack somebody else and sandbag a little bit, having the Teferi's protection as a backup plan? This is where knowledge is the most important. You now have one extra card that you're able to play with, meaning you have that many more decisions that you can make. So we tried to gather as much knowledge as possible. We chose to figure out what our deck wanted to do at that particular time, and then we analyzed the result of that action. Now we're back to the knowledge phase, in which case we decided we want to keep up the Teferi's protection and we want to sandbag a little bit. The later and later you can play that board wipe, the better, and the later you can play that Teferi's protection, the better. You just bought yourself one extra turn. And that right there is the main goal of sequencing. There's so much more nuance to this subject, but in most cases, these 3 steps are what get me through a lot of games. Obviously, the actual difficulty of sequencing comes when you're at the table and your mental stack is as high as possible. You're going to be stressed, you're going to have way more cards that you're dealing with, and the situations aren't going to be as simple as these hypotheticals. And that is okay. You're not going to be perfect, but these 3 steps usually help me in my games, and I know for sure they'll help you in your games. One other little thing I will say about sequencing is understanding how your cards fit together. In that knowledge step, you also want to see what kind of triggers are going to go off if I play a certain card. If I play Growth Spiral, am I going to get pinged by an Orcish Bowmaster? If I Wrath of God, is that Zergo deck going to deal a ton of damage to me, or do they have mostly non-token permanents? You got to figure out what your cards are going to cause to happen. Not just what they do, but what might trigger after they do their thing. So that's one other thing I would keep in mind. But besides that, there's not much else about sequencing that I can really talk to you about today. A lot of it's just going to have to come up naturally in your games. And of course, the biggest factor of sequencing all depends on your deck. Each deck is going to have a different game plan, and they're going to be looking for different cards on the battlefield that could potentially stop them from winning. This is why sequencing is so difficult, because it is so easy to mess up, and there are so many possibilities that could happen and occur in a single Magic the Gathering game. But sequencing is what brings us back to this game over and over and over again. Having so many options and figuring out what the perfect line is the ultimate fun of this game. At least if you're a Johnny or a Spike. If you're a Timmy, you know what? Just cast the Colossal Dreadmaw. Just force him to have the board wipe anyways. So this might seem like a pretty reduced and simple way of thinking about sequencing, and I think that's a good thing. I think the easier you can make these processes, the better. If you just think knowledge, results, repeat, knowledge, results, repeat, you'll be in a good spot. So thank you guys all so much for watching, and I hope you guys have sequenced better by the end of this video. If you guys enjoyed this content, please feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all next time.